Black nurse fired for being too quiet. 100 MH-60. Black Hawk surrounded her house. That morning, the morning they fired Shonda Hayes, was the same morning she stopped drinking coffee. She sat across from Chief Administrator Wexler in a VA hospital office that smelled like printer ink and denial. A pink slip sat on the desk between them like a loaded weapon. Wexler didn't look her in the eye. He just repeated words like disruptive, withdrawn, and communication breakdown. Words that sounded like they were picked off a script, cold, clean, rehearsed. You've always been. Difficult to assess, Wexler mumbled, fingers twitching against his empty coffee mug. And lately you've grown increasingly quiet. Shonda blinked slowly. The room shrank. I didn't realize silence was against protocol, she said. Wexler hesitated. It's not, but the team feels uncomfortable, and there's the matter of your file. He turned his monitor so she couldn't see the screen, pretending to scroll. There's a redacted section in your military medical history. Several, actually. You were Army Medical Corps, attached to Task Force 19 in Kandahar, correct. She didn't answer. Wexler tapped the screen nervously. You don't talk about your deployments. Your patients say you're competent. No, more than that. They say you saved lives, but the staff say you're cold, unreachable. She leaned forward slightly, enough to make the man recoil. Her voice, when it came, was sandpaper soft. I did 2 tours. I pulled people's lungs out of their throats to get air into them. I used zip ties to stop arterial bleeds. I kept 18-year-old boys alive long enough for their mothers to say goodbye on a satellite call. So, forgive me if I'm not chatty in the break room. Wexler flushed. This isn't a disciplinary action, Shonda. It's an administrative decision, effective immediately. She stood. Got it. He offered his hand. She didn't take it. By 1600 hours, she was home. A modest 2-story farmhouse in rural Virginia. Isolated, surrounded by trees, hills, and silence. She liked it that way. No neighbors, no noise, no questions. She changed out of her scrubs, folded them with military precision, and stowed them in a box with her name badge and trauma shears. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried in years. That night she cleaned every weapon in her gun safe. AR-15, Glock 19, Mossberg 500. She didn't know why, not exactly. Just a twitch in her spine, a muscle memory of war. At Oro 2:30 she stepped outside barefoot, looked up at the stars, nothing but crickets and wind. She stayed like that for a while, listening. And then she heard it. A low distant hum. At 05:03, the ground began to shake. She woke before the lights flickered, before the dog tags on her nightstand began to rattle. The first Black Hawk came in low, rotor wash flattening the treetops. Then another. Then 10. Then 50. Then 100. 100 MH-60 Blackhawks in staggered formation, surrounding her house like a ritual. No sirens, no warnings, just coordinated movement and silent judgment. Her heartbeat slowed, not from fear, from training. They didn't send that kind of firepower unless they expected resistance, and the government didn't expect resistance from nurses, unless they were hiding something. She moved fast, sweats, boots, tactical belt, grabbed the go bag from the false wall behind the dryer. Contents, burner phone, encrypted USB 9mm sidearm, 2 suppressors, medical kit, iodine tablets, small roll of Afghan currency. She paused only once, hands trembling as she pulled open the wooden crate beneath her bed. Inside, a black case, military grade, unmarked. She opened it. Inside was a vial. A single-use auto-injector labeled only 5th dose. She stared at it for a beat, then sealed the case. Not yet. Outside, floodlights cut through the darkness. Shadows moved, fast, silent, trained. She activated the dead switch under the floorboards. A faint click. 15 seconds. She exited through the crawl space, army crawling through mud, keeping low to avoid drones overhead. The ground trembled again as a group of fast-roping operators descended from a nearby helo. They moved like they'd trained for this exact layout, like they knew her habits, her weaknesses. Only they didn't. She was already a mile out, slipping through the creek bed that led to the old ranger trail. Her breathing was controlled, her mind silent, her pulse steady. Behind her, the farmhouse exploded in a controlled fireball, enough to destroy files, weapons, fingerprints. She didn't flinch. At 6:30, a Department of Defense press release labeled Shonda Hayes a missing federal employee involved in a domestic threat investigation. They didn't name the threat. By noon, her face was on 6 watch lists. By nightfall, she was legend. But legends don't bleed. And Shonda Hayes was human. She just wasn't one of theirs anymore. By the time the helicopters faded into the tree-lined smoke behind her, Shonda was 10 miles southeast and ghosting through the Shenandoah backwoods like she had in Helmand. No light, no trail, no sound. She kept to natural cover, moving with calculated silence. Heel-toe foot placement, pause every third step. Her mind stayed crisp, alert, clocking elevation shifts, wind direction, humidity. Combat nurse? Yes, but first and always soldier. They'd forgotten that. By 0740, she reached the extraction cache. It was hidden inside a collapsed hunting blind, half swallowed by the earth. She unlatched the metal box buried beneath moss and mud, pulling out a mylar-wrapped pouch and a waterproof radio transceiver. The pouch contained field sustenance, energy chews, glucose tabs, caffeine strips. The radio was older tech, analog frequency hopper, harder to trace. She powered it on, dialed in the encrypted frequency, static, then a click, then silence, then a woman's voice, low, calm, with a trace of North Carolina in the vowels. Operator name and mission ghost code. Shonda didn't hesitate. Sierra Hotel 04, code black, level V. A beat. Goddamn, Hayes? Affirmative. Jesus, girl, you're burned. I need a clean exit. Northern route, secondary contact. Copy? It's gonna take 24. You hot? Cold now. They'll warm back up by nightfall. Understood. Hold at waypoint Echo. Watch for scavenger drones. Types 2 and 3 are active in your grid. Don't use infrared. Copy. Echo it is. And Hayes, don't trust any uniforms, not even old ones. The line clicked off. She exhaled once, long and slow. They weren't coming for her because she was dangerous. They were coming because she knew something. Something she didn't even remember yet. But someone, somewhere, was afraid she might. She moved northeast, contouring around the hills until she reached an abandoned ranger station. From the outside, it looked collapsed, nature reclaiming architecture. But Shonda had reinforced it 6 years ago, under a different name, a different life. Inside was her mirror stash. Everything duplicated. Clothes, burner IDs, cash, basic medical equipment, a folded U.S. Army combat uniform with no insignia. She stared at the uniform for a moment too long. Then, movement. Outside. She felt it before she saw it, that ripple in the air, a subtle disruption in the pattern of silence. She moved quickly but quietly, sliding across the wood floor and peering through the cracked pane of glass. 2 figures. Male. Civilian clothes, military posture. Watching the station from 20 meters out. Then one of them raised a hand and pointed directly at her. No time. She flipped the table, grabbed the carbine from the wall mount, and vaulted through the side window. Gunfire erupted behind her, automatic and tight. Not warning shots, kill zone fire. She hit the ground rolling, knees absorbing the impact, then sprinted into the woods. They gave chase, light, fast, experienced. Not DOD, not locals, contractors. Wet work. She zigzagged through underbrush, using trees as cover, counting her breaths. Her internal clock kept beat. She knew her sprint-to-burst limit was 45 seconds before her vision began to tunnel. At 39, she dropped prone and rolled behind a downed cedar. She raised the carbine, adjusted the sight, and waited. The first assailant broke cover. She fired once. Neck shot. The second dove for cover, shouting into a wrist mic. Alpha 2 down. She's armed and live. Repeat. Target is... Shonda flanked wide, staying low. Came up behind him like a shadow, struck his neck with the butt of the carbine, then disarmed him mid-fall. She pinned him to the ground, one knee on his spine, pistol to his ear. Who sent you? You know who. Say it. Project Hollow. She froze. That word hadn't crossed her ears since the medevac bay in Kandahar. She remembered the silence, the glass room, the injections. Her grip tightened. How much of me did they sell? He laughed through broken teeth. All of you, even the parts you can't see. She knocked him out with one clean strike, then stripped him of his gear. Tracked his comms to a repeater drone parked 3 clicks east. She disabled it, used the signal to reroute a false confirmation to his command team. Target neutralized. Body compromised. Initiating withdrawal. She smashed the device under her boot. No drones followed. By 1930 hours, Shonda reached Waypoint Echo. It was an abandoned rail tunnel collapsed at both ends. She slipped inside, stepping over rusted tracks and frozen puddles. She built a small fire using flint and pine needles, just enough to warm her hands. Her reflection in the metal panel opposite her was alien. Dirt-smeared skin. Eyes sharp, unreadable. Muscles tense from days of anticipation. And underneath it all, something deeper. A memory, a face, a scream that wasn't hers. Then, from the darkness, came a voice. You shouldn't be alive. Shonda turned slowly, firearm already halfway drawn. A woman stepped into the glow of the firelight. Black, mid-40s, lean. Civilian clothes but military bearing. Her eyes were heavy with recognition. And guilt. Dr. Langston, Shonda said. The woman nodded. You remember me? I remember the glass rooms. I remember the silence. I remember your voice giving the orders. Langston's jaw clenched. You were the only one who came back whole. I'm not whole. No, you're not. A long silence passed. They sent 100 Blackhawks for me, Doctor. Want to explain that? Langston hesitated. Then, you were the final prototype, and you weren't supposed to remember any of it. Shonda stepped forward, weapon raised. Then explain something to me. What? Why do I remember a 5th injection? One that wasn't logged? Langston's face went pale. You shouldn't. But I do. Then it's already started. Shonda didn't lower the weapon. What has? Langston looked into her eyes. Your extraction didn't fail, Shonda. It activated you. And suddenly the silence inside her wasn't quiet anymore. It was waiting. They moved at night, always. Doctor. Langston walked 10 paces behind Shonda through the woods, never ahead. It was an old instinct. Soldiers lead, scientists follow. But this wasn't Afghanistan. There were no clear enemy lines, no walls separating the war zone from the world. This was Virginia. This was home, and the war had come to it. Langston kept trying to speak, kept trying to fill the space with explanations, justifications, words to drown out the silence she'd once drilled into Shonda's body like a needle into bone. But Shonda didn't let her. She just walked, watched, listened. Every crack of twig, every shift in wind direction. Because somewhere out here, just past the tree line, men with satellite maps and kill orders were already plotting their next intercept. They always did. By sunrise, they'd made it to a utility shack near an old defunct mining route. Shonda pried the door open with a crowbar, checked it for drones and tripwires, then waved Langston in. Langston stumbled to the floor, coughing into her coat sleeve. You weren't designed to survive in the field, Etta, Shonda said, pulling down blackout curtains. I wasn't designed for this at all. Langston rasped. Shonda lit a match, found an old lantern, and filled the room with a weak yellow glow. She knelt to unpack her medical kit, but paused mid-motion. Her eyes narrowed. She sniffed the air once. Copper. Blood. The source was in the corner. A body, young, male, 20-something, crumpled on the floor like a broken chair. Civilian clothes, but calloused hands, lungs barely moving, bleeding from the thigh and the left side of his chest. Shonda reached him in 2 strides and dropped to her knees. "Pulse is weak," she muttered. "Entry wound in the upper abdomen. Not deep enough to drop him, but—" She peeled back his jacket. Found a crude tourniquet tied with an electrical cord. "Did you see him when we came in?" Langston asked. "No." "Then he was already dying." Shonda shot her a look. "Then we're going to keep him that way." She tore into her med kit. Gauze, clotting agent, compress bandage, saline flush. Her hands moved like a machine. Years of trauma surgery compressed into a single minute. The kid moaned. "Stay with me," she said, almost without thinking. "What's your name?" He tried to speak, but only blood came out. She turned his head gently.
"Checked the airway. Cleared the obstruction." Langston watched from the shadows. "Why are you helping him?" Shonda didn't answer. She just wrapped the compression bandage tighter. "Do you know what that program was doing to your empathy circuits?" Langston went on. "You were being rewired to ignore pain, suppress emotional response. What you're doing right now, it shouldn't be possible."
Shonda stood slowly. Her gloves were soaked in blood, but her hands didn't shake. "People think silence means emptiness," she said, "but sometimes it's just pressure, building, waiting." Langston took a cautious step forward. "That man isn't random. He didn't get hurt here by accident." "I know," Shonda said, already checking his pockets. Inside the jacket, a crumpled ID card. Doe D Civilian Contractor, Logistics Division. But it had been wiped. Black marker over the name, serial number scratched out. She found something else, too. A piece of paper folded 4 times and soaked with blood. A map. One location circled in red. Vaughn Ridge, Ridge Point Data Facility. "Government site?" she asked Langston. Langston nodded grimly. "Not officially. Ridgepoint was shut down 8 years ago, but the Shell Corporation still moves millions in biotech grants. If he's carrying this—" "He wasn't trying to escape," Shonda said. "He was trying to deliver it. And now?" "Now he's dying," she said, looking at the kid, "because someone decided I wasn't supposed to know." Langston moved closer. "If he dies, he takes the source with him. He's not going to die." An hour later, Shonda had him stabilized, fluids in. Bleeding stopped, breathing shallow but even. "He'll need surgical care in 12 hours or less," she said, "but I bought him that time." Langston stared. "You shouldn't be able to do that, not without—" Shonda pulled the black case from her go bag and tossed it on the floor. Langston stepped back. "Is that the injection? The 5th? Shonda nodded. "You tell me what it is or I use it." Langston looked at her like someone watching a ghost assemble its own body. "That serum was never meant for field use. It's neuroadaptive. Live-coded to your DNA. It rewrites decision trees in real time, enhances memory, instinct, combat reflexes, but it's unstable. Past a certain threshold, it turns permanent." "Define permanent." "You'll never come back," Langston said. "Whatever part of you was left, the nurse, the woman, the person, she's gone." Shonda stared at the vial, the faint shimmer of blue in the injector. It pulsed like something alive. "Then why did you give it to me?" Langston didn't answer. "Tell me," Shonda said, stepping closer. "I didn't," Langston whispered. "You stole it. After the last test." Shonda stopped. Something shifted in her. Not just confusion, a memory fragment. A cold room, a scream echoing through glass. Her own fingers stealing something from a tray. A voice whispering in her ear. "They'll silence you, before the silence takes them." "I don't remember that," she said. "You weren't supposed to," Langston replied. But if you're remembering now, then your cognitive firewall is breaking. The programming's collapsing in on itself. Shonda held the vial up to the light. Good, she said. Let it all fall apart. That night, they left the kid in a safe spot near a ranger station with a burner phone taped to his chest and a single note. He didn't betray you. He believed in her. Then they moved, toward Ridgepoint. Shonda didn't sleep. She didn't need to, because something inside her had changed. Not broken, not healed, activated, and she could feel it rising. Not like fire, more like a tide. Slow, irresistible, and coming for everyone who tried to erase her. The Ridgepoint facility wasn't on any official maps, but Shonda knew the geometry of secrets. She could see it in the landscape, unnatural flatness in the trees, scrub growth that had been chemically managed, rocks placed like deliberate camouflage. The government was never as invisible as it thought it was. By the time she and Langston reached the edge of the perimeter, dawn was burning through the treetops. Shonda crouched low in the brush, scanning the clearing beyond the ridge. The structure was brutalist. Poured concrete, no windows, one entrance. Surveillance was disguised as wildlife cameras, their lenses disguised beneath synthetic bark. Langston squinted through binoculars. Thermal mesh on the walls. That's new. Last I heard, Ridgepoint was mothballed. Shonda shook her head. It's live. Power grid's humming. See the ripple on the dirt? She pointed to a faint shimmer, like heat coming off black top. Sensor field, Langston murmured. Shonda pulled a small device from her pack, cylindrical, matte black, no markings. She turned the dial, activating a localized EMP burst. The shimmer vanished. We've got a 30-second breach window, she said. Then they'll know we're here. Langston hesitated. What if this is a trap? Shonda looked at her, cold. It is. Then she moved. Inside, the air was recycled, dry, sterile. The walls were painted in a neutral gray, designed to be forgotten. Shonda's boots moved in silence, barely scuffing the floor. Langston followed, ducking beneath motion detectors she hadn't noticed until Shonda pointed. They passed through 2 empty corridors before reaching the main lab wing. A massive biometric door stood at the end. Retinal, voice, and nerve pattern required. Langston stepped forward, eyes scanning the panel. I'll need 60 seconds, she said. You have 30. Shonda dropped to one knee, covering the hall behind them. Langston began muttering to herself. Her fingers flew across the touchscreen, bypassing protocols with muscle memory and desperation. Shonda counted the seconds by heartbeats. At 35, the lock clicked open. You're lucky I like you, Langston said. Don't start now. They entered the lab. The room smelled like bleach and metal and betrayal. Stainless steel tables, dormant surgical rigs, a wall of glass cases containing vials, hard drives, tissue samples. Shonda's eyes scanned the room until they stopped on a tank in the center. Suspension gel, human body inside, female, black, maybe 30. Langston went pale. Oh my God. Shonda stepped closer. The woman in the tank had her face, or close to it, genetically similar, not identical. Clones? She asked. No, Langston said, voice low. Bioprinted proxies. Grown to test the serum iterations before field deployment. They used your base sequence as a template. You were the stable line. Shonda stared at the floating woman. Her fingers itched toward her weapon. You made corpses with my name on them. Langston flinched. It wasn't supposed to go this far. The Hollow program was buried after the Geneva files leaked, but the private sector picked up the pieces. They called it something else. Something cleaner. They always do. Shonda turned to the data wall. Dozens of encrypted drives stacked in a case labeled Property of Neurovantius, Biotech Project, Hollow, Phase 5. Shonda pulled her own encrypted USB and slotted it into the master port. Data transfer began, red lines scrolling across the display, copying gigabytes of classified material. Names, dates, procedures, victims, survivors. Her hand hovered over the delete key. "Burn it," she said. Langston nodded. Then the alarms screamed. They were in the hallway before the speakers finished their warning. "Unauthorized intrusion! Intrusion! Intrusion!" Shonda slammed a door panel, sealing the lab behind them. Gunfire erupted from the southern corridor. A team of black-clad operators advanced in a diamond pattern, weapons raised. Shonda grabbed Langston and dove behind a blast shield as rounds tore into the walls. "Exit route!" she yelled. "There's a sublevel emergency stairwell behind the main server bank." Shonda leaned out, fired 3 suppressed shots. 2 hits, 1 neutralized. She didn't wait to watch him fall. She grabbed Langston by the collar and pulled her into a sprint. They ran past bodies in stasis, half-formed simulations. Children, soldiers, nurses, all based on one genetic profile. Hers. Langston was crying now. "I didn't know. I didn't—" "Save it for the debrief," Shonda snapped. They hit the stairwell. Shonda dropped a flash charge behind them and sealed the bulkhead. As they descended, a sound echoed from below, metal on metal. A door opening. Footsteps. Shonda stopped, raised her weapon. A figure stepped into the stairwell from the shadows. A woman. Combat fatigues. Left eye cybernetic. She looked at Shonda like someone meeting a twin. "You're Sierra Hotel 04, the woman said. Shonda said nothing. "I'm 05, Langston gasped. "That's not possible. She's one of the field test survivors," Shonda muttered. "They told me I was the only one." 05 smiled, not kindly. "They told us both a lot of things." She raised her weapon. Shonda fired first. The impact threw 05 back into the stair rail. But she didn't fall. She reset, moved forward like a machine on autopilot. "She's enhanced," Langston whispered. Shonda nodded. "So am I." They fought in the dark, no wasted movement. Every strike calculated, military precision versus military instinct. But Shonda had one advantage. She remembered pain. She used it. Broke 05's wrist in a joint lock, pinned her to the wall, and pressed her pistol to the side of her head. "Tell me who's still alive," she demanded. 05 spit blood and grinned. "We all are. You just forgot." Shonda pulled the trigger. They surfaced in a swamp 3 miles from the Ridgepoint compound. Langston was bleeding from the shoulder. Shonda was limping. But they had the data, and in her chest, a rage was beginning to calcify. Not anger, not vengeance, purpose. That night, across multiple continents, the copied Ridgepoint files began to appear in hidden corners of the dark web, posted by a ghost account known only as The Quiet Code. Neurovantis stock crashed 17% in 3 hours. 2 senators resigned. The rest stayed silent. Shonda didn't wait for applause. She never had. They didn't celebrate the leak. Shonda had learned a long time ago that truth didn't end wars. It escalated them. They took shelter in a dead zone 30 miles west, an abandoned FEMA logistics hub buried under a derelict highway spur. Concrete bunker, no signal, no name. The kind of place that existed only after something had already gone wrong. Langston collapsed onto a crate the moment they sealed the blast door. Her shoulder wound had worsened, arterial bleed she'd tried to hide through adrenaline and guilt. "Sit still," Shonda said. Langston laughed weakly. "You always say that like it's optional." Shonda cut away the fabric, cleaned the wound, worked fast. Her hands were steady, but her mind wasn't. Not anymore. Because since Ridgepoint, something had changed. Not the obvious things. Strength, reflex, recall. Those had been building for days. It was the recognition. Every corridor she walked now felt familiar. Every locked door felt already opened. Like her mind had been here before, mapped these places, rehearsed them. As if the program hadn't just altered her, it had trained her. Langston winced as Shonda sutured. "You saw her," she said quietly. 05. "I killed her." "No," Langston said. "You terminated a body. There's a difference." Shonda tied the final knot and leaned back. Don't do that. Do what? Turn this into theory, Shonda said. She bled. She felt pain. She begged. Langston looked away. So did the others. That landed. How many? Shonda asked. Langston swallowed. The mirror room held 48. Shonda froze. Held? Archived? Langston corrected. Viable neural scans, behavioral copies, emotional baselines. Shonda stood slowly. You said Ridgepoint was Phase 5. It was, Langston said. But Phase 5 wasn't the end. It was the filter. Shonda's jaw tightened. Explain. Langston took a breath. They weren't trying to make soldiers, or medics, or operatives. They were trying to isolate a psychological constant. What constant? The ability to function without external validation, Langston said. No praise, no approval, no emotional feedback loop. Silence that doesn't collapse into instability. Shonda felt something cold move through her chest. They chose nurses, she said. Yes, because we work without witnesses. Yes, and black women, Shonda continued, because no one notices when we endure. Langston didn't argue. 3 hours later, Langston unlocked a section of the stolen data she hadn't dared open before. The screen filled with white. Then faces. Rows and rows of them. Women. Different ages, different builds. Some in uniform, some in scrubs. Some in civilian clothes. All black. All staring straight ahead. All quiet. Shonda leaned closer. Her breath slowed. Her vision sharpened. They catalogued us, she said. They mirrored you, Langston replied. Your neural responses were the most stable. You became the baseline. The rest were adjusted toward you. Shonda's eyes stopped on one image. A woman with her eyes, her mouth, a scar above the left brow Shonda had gotten in Kandahar. Designation beneath the image. Subject 17B. Deceased. She felt it then. Not grief, pressure. Like standing too close to a structural failure that hadn't collapsed yet. Where is the mirror room now? She asked. Langston hesitated. Langston, it's not a place, she said. It's a protocol, distributed, redundant. There are physical sites, yes, but the room itself is virtual. An adaptive simulation where they test behavioral divergence. Shonda straightened. So they're still running it? Yes. And they're still using us. Langston nodded. The leak scared them, but it won't stop them. It'll just make them go darker. Shonda turned away from the screen, walked to the far wall of the bunker. There was a mirror there, cracked, old, probably left behind by a long-dead technician. She stood in front of it, studied herself. The eyes weren't the same anymore. They weren't empty. They weren't quiet. They were observant. I want in, she said. Langston blinked. Into the mirror room? Yes. That's impossible. It's not an interface. It's a cognitive environment. You don't log into it. You're inducted. Then induct me. Langston stood. Shonda, if you go in there consciously, you may not come back intact. The program feeds on identity erosion. It fractures the self until only function remains. Shonda smiled faintly. You're late with that warning. The induction wasn't dramatic. No machines, no injections, just code. Langston uploaded the protocol through the stolen neural bridge. A backdoor keyed to Shonda's original signature. The moment it activated, the world tilted. The bunker dissolved. The mirror became infinite. Shonda stood in a white room with no corners. And she wasn't alone. They stood around her in a circle, 47 women, some younger, some older, some scarred, some whole. All familiar, all her, not copies, iterations. You finally came, one of them said, her voice, different cadence. Where are we? Shonda asked. In the quiet, another replied. A third stepped forward. They built this place to observe us, to predict us, to weaponize what survives when everything else is stripped away. And you stayed? Shonda asked. We couldn't leave, said Subject 17B, the one who was supposed to be dead. But you can. Shonda felt the weight of them pressing in, not on her body, but on her choices. What happens if I do? She asked. The women exchanged looks. Then the mirror room breaks, one said. And if I don't? Then we stay archived, said another, and they keep making more of us. Shonda closed her eyes. Silence bloomed, but it wasn't empty. It was full. When she opened them again, her voice was steady. Then we're done being mirrors. The room shuddered. Cracks raced through the white. Alarms, digital distant, began to scream. Somewhere, engineers panicked. Servers overheated. Models diverged. And for the first time since Project Hollow began, the system couldn't predict what came next. Because Shonda Hayes wasn't quiet anymore. She was listening. And she was about to answer. They taught her how to stop a heart in 6 seconds. They never taught her how to restart her own. Camp Nightshade, Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, winter 2012. The facility wasn't on any map, not even military ones, buried behind an Afghan National Army depot that hadn't been operational in years. The compound sat under the false cover of a trauma stabilization unit. That was the official story. Unofficially, it was night school, a black site disguised as a forward-deployed medical training outpost. No insignia, no rank hierarchy. Only clearance levels and eyes that didn't blink when blood hit the floor. Shonda had been transferred there after her second tour with the 44th Medical Battalion. She'd stabilized a platoon under enemy fire after an IED strike, then walked 2 miles through open terrain with a soldier's lung held shut by her own hand. The brass gave her a medal. The program gave her an invitation. Come do the work that actually matters, they said. We save soldiers before they're broken, they promised. She believed them. Back then, they arrived at night. Always. No lights. No announcements. Candidates were told to report with no weapons, no gear, no questions. They took her blood, her voice print, a cortical map of her pain response. Then they took her name. Not literally, just enough to file her under a designation. Sierra Hotel 04. She didn't know it meant she was the 4th in a chain of modified caregivers. She didn't know they'd already lost 2. She didn't know Subject 03 had flatlined in the isolation chamber after week 8, and that they labeled her death emotional feedback loop failure. She didn't know anything. That was the point. The training wasn't about medicine. Not really. Yes, they drilled wound management, triage under fire, chemical exposure response, but that wasn't what broke people. It was the silence. 3 weeks in, they began the isolation runs, 12-hour rotations in soundless operating bays, working on wounded AI simulants who screamed like real men but never died. Then came the mirror tests, where Shonda watched her own face on a monitor replay trauma she didn't remember inflicting. They told her it was procedural desensitization. They told her it was routine. They didn't tell her they were mapping the parts of her brain that didn't react. In her 5th week, she was assigned to Instructor Maddox, former JSOC field medic, burned out, dead eyes, black gloves. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. You're not here to heal people, he said on her first day. You're here to learn how to function when empathy gets you killed. He had her treat goats, pigs, even sedated prisoners pulled from black site interrogations, people too dangerous to be logged in any database. You're going to learn how to make pain obey, Maddox said. And she did. But what she didn't learn, what they made sure she never learned, was how to stop once the pain obeyed. She began to forget things. Little things at first. A patient's name. Her mother's voice. The taste of water that hadn't been filtered through iodine. Then it got worse. She forgot what kindness felt like when it wasn't reflexive. She forgot what silence was before it became a weapon. She forgot herself. Then came the day that changed everything. March 3rd, 2013. A CIA convoy hit by a triple-staged ambush north of Kandahar Shonda was dispatched with a recovery team under Maddox, but there were no survivors. Only one body, a young black woman, mid-20s, medical uniform. Her face was identical to Shonda's, not similar, exact, burned into her memory. She was one of the earlier tests, Maddox said coldly. Didn't hold. Emotional reflexes spiked under trauma. Her silence broke. Shonda stared down at the corpse. I thought I was the first. You're the first stable, he replied. The rest were learning curve. That night she sat alone in the barracks, hands shaking, her dog tags cold against her chest. She didn't sleep. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe like a person anymore. Present day. Virginia, dead zone. Langston finished reading the file. Her hands trembled. You were never meant to remember this, she said. I remember all of it now, Shonda said. The room, the faces, the one that looked like me. She wasn't a clone, Langston whispered. She was a full neural graft on a compatible donor. They didn't tell you because it destabilized the previous subject, identity contamination. She was screaming, Shonda said. In my dreams, that wasn't PTSD, that was her memory, bleeding into mine. Langston's voice was small. The mirror room doesn't forget. Shonda stood, walked to the far wall where a steel locker sat untouched. She opened it. Inside, her old uniform, the real one. Combat nurse stripes, blood stains that never washed out. She stripped silently and put it on. Boots, gloves, belt, patch, not for pride, for memory. I'm going back, she said. To night school? Shonda nodded. They still use it as, she said. Still recruit, still break. Langston looked stricken. They'll be waiting for you. I hope so. She loaded her weapons with mechanical efficiency, no fury, no tremor, just purpose. You don't owe them anything, Langston said. I know, Shonda replied. That's why I'm not giving them mercy. That night, in an encrypted message buried beneath layers of firewalled code, a signal was broadcast. Code Black Mirror Breach initiated SH-4 returning to origin. The old network stirred, and far across the country, in a penthouse bathed in LED light and silence, a man with no official title opened a sealed case and whispered, She remembers. His aide looked up. Do we activate the widows? The man smiled. No. He leaned back. We deploy the architects. The first message arrived without words, just a symbol, a black circle fractured by a thin white line, like a horizon split by dawn. Shonda saw it flash once on the burner phone, then disappear. No vibration, no alert. If you weren't looking directly at the screen, you missed it. She didn't. She never missed things like that anymore. Is that? Langston began. Yes, Shonda said. They saw the mirror room collapse. That symbol isn't public, Langston whispered. It was scrubbed after they buried the survivors, Shonda finished. The ones who didn't fit. Shonda powered the phone down, removed the battery, then slid it back in. 3 seconds later, coordinates populated the screen on their own. West Virginia. Appalachian Dead Zone. An old coal town erased from census maps after a mine fire in '89. Langston stared. You think it's a trap? Shonda checked her weapons. Everything is. They arrived just after dusk. The town was hollowed out. Brick buildings sagging inward, streets choked with ash and weeds. No lights, no movement. The air smelled like iron and wet earth. Shonda stepped out of the vehicle first. Immediately she felt it. Eyes. Not hostile, not curious. Assessing. A woman emerged from the shadow of a collapsed storefront. Tall, muscular, gray threaded through her braids. A scar ran clean from jaw to collarbone. She raised her hands, palms open. You're late, the woman said. Shonda tilted her head. You didn't give a time. The woman smiled faintly. That checks. She turned and whistled once, sharp, controlled. The town came alive. Figures stepped out of doorways, alleyways, rooftops. Women, all ages, all black. Some carried rifles, others knives. One leaned on a cane that Shonda recognized immediately as a disguised blade. Langston's breath caught. "How many are there?" "Enough," Shonda said. The scarred woman stepped closer. "Name's Marrow," she said. "They called me Widow One. I didn't keep it." Shonda studied her face. "You were night school. Early cycle." Marrow's eyes flickered. "Before they perfected the silence." "Before they perfected the lie," Shonda corrected. Marrow nodded. "You broke the mirror." "I cracked it," Shonda said. "It'll try to rebuild." "That's why we're here," Marrow replied. "The widows don't wait for permission anymore." They gathered underground in what used to be the mine's command center. Reinforced steel, old maps on the walls, new tech layered over rust and dust. This was the Widow Net, a decentralized network of survivors, medics, operatives, analysts, logistics specialists, women who had slipped through black programs, burn notices, and quiet erasures. They didn't sit in rows. They stood in a circle. Shonda stepped into the center without being asked. No one challenged her. They felt it too. The shift. The gravity. "They trained us to disappear," and Shonda said, "to endure without witnesses, to function without reward." Faces nodded, some angry, some numb. They thought silence meant obedience. She continued. They were wrong. Silence is where we listen, where we learn, where we decide. Marrow crossed her arms. "You want us to go loud?" "No," Shonda said. "I want us to go precise." She gestured to the screen Langston activated behind her. Facilities lit up across the map. Labs, shell companies, private airfields, offshore data vaults. Night school wasn't an anomaly, Shonda said. It was a curriculum, and it's still being taught. A woman with cybernetic fingers spoke up. "Architects are mobilizing. Private sector now. No uniforms, no chains of command." "Good," Shonda said. "That means they bleed." Another voice, younger, sharper. "What about exposure? The leaks already spooked Congress." Shonda shook her head. "Exposure is noise. They survive noise. What they can't survive is loss of control." She zoomed in on a single location, Kandahar province, night school, active again. "They rebuilt it," Marrow said quietly. "Yes," Shonda replied, "because they think the lesson still works." Langston stepped forward. "If you hit that site, they'll respond with everything they have." Shonda looked around the circle, met every pair of eyes. That's the point. Later, as plans were whispered and roles assigned, Marrow pulled Shonda aside. "You know what happens if this fails," Marrow said. "They won't just kill us. They'll erase the idea that we ever existed." Shonda checked the auto-injector in her pocket. The 5th dose. Still unused. Still waiting. "They already tried that," she said. "Didn't take." Marrow hesitated. "You're different from us." Shonda met her gaze. "I know." "Not stronger," Marrow said. "Quieter, but not empty." A faint smile touched Shonda's mouth. "That's because I was never meant to survive alone." Just before dawn, the Widow Net went live. Encrypted signals pulsed across continents. Sleeper nodes woke up. Dead accounts spoke. Old scars remembered why they hurt. And somewhere, deep inside a fortified facility built on borrowed land and stolen bodies, alarms began to chirp, not loud enough to panic, not soft enough to ignore. A technician frowned at his screen. "Sir," he said into the comm, "we're seeing anomalous coordination across multiple dark channels." A pause. Then a calm voice replied, "It's just noise." The technician hesitated. "Respectfully, sir, it's synchronized." Silence on the line. Then softly, "Find out who's conducting." The technician typed faster. A single identifier surfaced from the chaos. "SH-04. The voice on the other end went cold. "Evacuate the architects," it said, and wake the siege protocols. Shonda stood at the mouth of the mine, dawn light cutting the mountains in half. Behind her, the widows armed themselves in silence. Ahead of her, a war designed to be invisible was about to be seen. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The quiet had already spread. The widows didn't prepare for war. They remembered it. Weapons emerged from false walls, from crates disguised as rusted mining equipment, from under floorboards carved by women who had once memorized the patterns of military inspections and learned how to hide what mattered between those patterns. Marrow moved through the underground command hub with the calm of a battlefield surgeon. Widow 7 calibrated a portable jamming rig. Widow 3, barely 25 but with eyes older than the war, assembled a collapsible rifle on a crate marked "Defunct." Langston hovered near the far wall, pale and trembling. She wasn't a fighter, and now that the widows were mobilizing, she felt it. Her own fragility, her own past complicity, tightening around her throat. Shonda approached her. "You're shaking," Shonda said quietly. Langston tried to steady her breath. "Everyone here is a weapon. I'm a liability." Shonda shook her head. "No, you're a memory. That's more dangerous." Langston's eyes brimmed, not with tears but with something like shame. "If we survive this, I'll still owe all of you an apology." Shonda nodded once. "If we survive this, you'll owe yourself one." She didn't say it to be comforting. She said it because it was true. The assault began at 03:12, not with helicopters, with silence. Every bird stopped singing, every leaf stopped shaking, even the early morning wind seemed to hold its breath. "Drones," Widow 7 said, raising her scanner. "Type 4 spectral, high altitude. They're mapping thermal signatures for artillery placement." Marrow barked, "Net up! Scramble signatures!" Widow 7 activated the jamming array. A low hum rippled through the bunker. On the monitors, the drone feed blinked, stuttered, then fractured into static. "Good work," Marrow said, "but they're not going to rely on surveillance only. They know what we are." A deep vibration rolled through the mountains. Langston's eyes widened. What was that? Shonda answered without looking up. "Drop transport." Widow 3 cursed. "How many?" Shonda listened, counted the ripples in the earth. 3 heavy units, 1 light escort. Marrow's jaw flexed. "They're bringing infantry?" "No," Shonda said. "They're bringing architects." They surfaced from the mine in formation. 15 widows, each carrying a different discipline carved into their bones. Field surgery, reconnaissance, extraction, sabotage, infiltration, and Shonda leading them. The ridgeline glowed with faint red targeting lights as the transports descended. They weren't military models. They were sleeker, civilian shells with reinforced hulls, no insignia, silent engines, corporate muscle, night school's grown children. The first transport landed half a kilometer away. Figures stepped out, armored, masked, carrying weapons that weren't meant to kill. They were meant to capture. Langston whispered, horrified, "They want you alive." "They won't get what they want," Shonda said. Marrow lifted her rifle. "Widows, positions!" The women scattered, using the burned-out buildings as cover. Shonda crouched behind the collapsed frame of an old coal truss and watched the ground forces split into 3 tactical wedges. "They're sweeping to encircle us," she said. Marrow smirked. "Fine, let them circle. Circles break." Widow 3 signaled, "Explosives set." "Now?" Marrow asked. Shonda shook her head. "Not yet." She waited, felt the rhythm of the enemy's footsteps in her chest. They were coordinated, efficient, predictable, and that was their mistake. When the wedges closed within 20 meters, Shonda stood, exposed, visible, deliberate. Immediately, the lead unit barked through a vocoder. "Sierra Hotel 04, you are ordered to surrender for reintegration." "Reintegration?" Shonda almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she raised her weapon, not toward them, but toward the sky. She fired once, A signal shot. Marrow shouted, "Now!" The hillside erupted. Widow 3's charges detonated in a cascading arc, collapsing the slope and cutting the enemy formation clean in half. Dust and rock swallowed the front ranks. Shonda didn't wait for visibility. She moved, sprinting toward the weakest flank with surgical precision. The widows followed, each choosing their targets with the cold efficiency of women who had once been trained to stand beside death and tell it what to do. The enemy didn't fall easily. They were enhanced, some augmented, all conditioned. But enhancements didn't equal experience, and conditioning didn't equal purpose. Widow 7 dropped 2 with a modified EMP baton. Widow 9 used a garrote wire with quiet finality. Marrow dropped an entire squad with a wildfire burst from a fragmentation launcher. But the architects, they didn't fight. They watched. 3 of them stood at the far edge of the battlefield, hands clasped behind their backs, clad in civilian suits, unarmored, serene. One raised a phone, filmed the chaos. Langston stared, horrified. "What are they doing?" "Measuring," Shonda said. "Measuring what?" "How far we've evolved." The enemy second wave came harder, faster. Shock units with kinetic shields. 2 widows went down. 1 injured, 1 killed instantly by a concussive round. Shonda felt the loss like a slash across her ribs. Not grief, motivation. She reached for the 5th dose. Her thumb brushed the injector, then stopped. Not yet. Not until the moment required the thing she feared becoming. She shoved it back into her belt and pushed forward instead. Her movements sharpened. Reflexes reached past human. She sidestepped a kinetic blast, disarmed the shooter, and used his own momentum to break his cervical spine. Marrow fought beside her, panting, bleeding, exhilarated. "You always this fast?" "No," Shonda said. "They made me worse." But even with their skill, the widows were outnumbered. Enemy reinforcements poured from the tree line like a manufactured tide. "We need to fall back!" Widow 3 shouted. "No," Shonda said. Marrow looked at her. "We stay. We die." "We stay," Shonda repeated. "And they die first." But even she knew the math. 12 widows left, 24 enemies on the field. More incoming. Then, a low whistle, a coded pattern. Marrow's eyes widened. "Is that—" Shonda nodded. More widows emerged from the ridge. Units Langston had no records of. Unlisted survivors. Forgotten ghosts. They joined the fight with silent fury, and the tide shifted instantly. Minutes later, bodies littered the mountain. Enemy units broken. Architects retreating to their transports. One of them shouted through a loudspeaker, "This changes nothing. You are anomalies. We will adapt the program." Shonda raised her weapon. "No," she said, her voice cold enough to scar steel. "You will end it." Marrow lowered her rifle. "Shonda." But Shonda didn't shoot them. She shot the landing skids of their transport. The aircraft toppled. The architects screamed, not from pain, but from disbelief that someone like her would dare to undo them publicly. They fled on foot, scrambling into the tree line like rats chased from a burning silo. Widow 9 spat. "Cowards!" "No," Shonda said. "Archivists. They're already rewriting tonight as data." Langston stared at the battlefield. "We won." Shonda shook her head. "This wasn't the war," she said softly. "This was the invitation." Far away, in a fortified server vault humming with heat and power, dozens of screens flickered, algorithms recalculated, profiles updated, and in the center of the prediction grid, one identifier pulsed red: SH-04, uncontained erratic ascendant. Shonda stood at the ridge as sunrise broke open the sky. Below her, the widows gathered, bruised, breathing, unbroken. Behind her, the world shifted. Ahead of her, the road pointed toward Kandahar. Night school. Origin. Destination. "Next step?" Marrow asked. Shonda exhaled once. "We take the classroom," she said, "and burn the curriculum." Night school had always been a scar in Shonda's memory. something half seen, half felt, burned into her with needles and whispered commands. But now, as the widows rode across the outskirts of Kandahar in stolen transports and borrowed identities, she realized something unsettling. The closer they came, the more clearly she remembered it. Not just the layout, not just the drills, not just the screams. She remembered the conversations, the ones whispered behind mirrored glass while she lay sedated, her mind open like an unfinished equation. She's stabilizing faster than the others. Emotional suppression at 92%. But the quiet, does it cost her something? Everything costs something. And she remembered something else too. A phrase spoken by a woman she never saw clearly, only through the reflection of a reflection. When she reaches threshold, the final dose will choose her. She didn't know what that meant then. She was afraid she was about to find out. They reached the compound at 0347. It hadn't changed. Reinforced walls, shielded roof, guard towers disguised as aid posts, the same scent of burned disinfectant and desert sand. A hospital made to look humanitarian, but every inch was a lie. Marrow crouched beside her at the ridge. "You know they're expecting you," she said. Shonda nodded. "Good," Marrow snorted. "You're too calm for what's coming." Shonda exhaled. "No, I'm too quiet." The widows waited for her signal, but she didn't look at them. She looked at Langston, who was gripping her medical kit like a flotation device. "You stay back," Shonda said. Langston shook her head. "You'll need someone to keep you alive." "I need someone to keep me human." Langston swallowed. "Then I'll try." Shonda squeezed her shoulder once, briefly, firmly, then rose. "Widows," Marrow called out softly. "On, leader." They moved in formation behind Shonda, 36 women shaped by war and silence, each carrying a reason to end the program that made them and broke them. But only Shonda carried the 5th dose, and it pulsed against her hip like a second heartbeat. They breached the outer perimeter without firing a shot. Widow Tech specialists hijacked the retinal scanners. Widow 3 jammed the motion sensors. Widow 9 sedated the guards with toxin-coated needles that dissolved in blood in less than 4 minutes. Shonda moved through the corridors with terrifying ease. The reflectionless floors, the sterilized walls, the dim overhead lights, every inch of it was familiar. "It's like she's already been through here tonight," Marrow whispered. "Not tonight," Shonda said. "Years ago." "How? You never completed the final cycle." Shonda didn't answer. She turned the next corner and froze, because the hallway ahead wasn't empty. Standing in perfect formation, wearing gray uniforms that made them look like ghosts sculpted from battlefield dust, were 12 women, silent, expressionless, each one with Shonda's bone structure, each one with her gait, each one with her eyes. Marrow swore under her breath. "Mirror cohorts," Langston whispered, horrified. "No, these are the Ascendant line, the ones they built after Shonda escaped." One of the women stepped forward. Her face was younger, untouched by sun or wind, artificial in its perfection. "Designation SH-04, she said. "You have returned." Shonda raised her chin. "Not to join you." "No," the woman said, "to complete your function." "What function?" "To transcend." The corridor lights snapped to blood red. Doors slammed shut behind them. Widows drew weapons instantly, but the cohorts didn't react. They just watched Shonda with identical calm. Then the Ascendant line spoke together. 12 voices in one chord. "You were the template. We are the revision." Shonda felt her fingers twitch toward the 5th dose. Not yet. Not yet. Not. But then the glass behind the cohorts flickered, and another figure stepped into view. A man, silver hair, suit immaculate, eyes like cold metrics. Director Hale, the architect who had overseen night school, the architect who approved her injections, the architect whose voice had haunted the quiet inside her skull. "SH-04, Hale said, his voice smooth as sanded bone. "You have exceeded projections." Shonda didn't speak. Hale smiled faintly. You were built to survive, but you were never built to lead. That anomaly, your empathy, your choice-making, your defiance, that was the flaw. Marrow muttered, "Tell him to come say that closer." But Hale continued, ignoring the widows entirely. Tonight you've proven the value of the flaw. You've united the failures. You've given coherence to chaos. And now, you've brought them all here, to the chamber where the quiet code was written. He stepped backward, revealing the room behind the glass. Shonda felt the breath go still in her chest. The mirror room. The real one. Banks of servers wrapped around a circular chamber. Neural rigs suspended from the ceiling. A floor of tempered glass over frozen bodies suspended in hyper-oxygenated fluid. Women who looked like her, preserved mid-thought, mid-silence, mid-erasure. This is where we built you, Hale said softly. This is where you'll finish what we started. The cohorts raised their hands in unison. Their palms glowed. Biometric triggers. Shonda understood instantly. They weren't blocking her path. They were waiting for her activation. Marrow shouted, "Shonda, move!" Then the cohorts fired. A wave of non-lethal neuromodulation pulses rippled toward her, meant to shut down her motor cortex, freeze her in place, force compliance. Shonda reached for the 5th dose. Time seemed to slow. Langston screamed, "Don't!" But Shonda already knew. The choice wasn't between becoming a weapon or staying human. The choice was between letting others define her or writing her own ending. She palmed the auto-injector, lifted it to her neck, and drove the needle in. The world shattered. Sound collapsed into white static. Light folded into geometry. Her pulse became a battlefield drum. The 5th dose hit her bloodstream like liquid lightning. Her muscles seized. Her vision turned inside out. She felt her mind split, and then reassemble into something vast. She could hear them, the ascendant line, the mirror room, the neural lattice humming beneath the floor. She could even hear Hale's heartbeat, slow, arrogant, believing he'd won. Shonda opened her eyes. The neuromod pulses hit her and dissolved. She stepped forward. Marrow whispered, "Holy God!" Shonda wasn't faster. She wasn't stronger. Not exactly. She was awake. Completely. Utterly. Finally. "Let's finish this," she said. Her voice was still quiet, but it carried like thunder. For the first time since night school, Shonda felt whole. Not calm. Not quiet. Not empty. Whole. The 5th dose didn't erase her humanity. It amplified it. Every memory sharpened. Every instinct clarified. Every fracture aligned into purpose. What they meant as a leash became a weapon. What they meant as erasure became identity. And now the architects finally understood the danger of a woman who wasn't supposed to survive understanding herself. The ascendant line moved first. 12 enhanced bodies surged forward, synchronized and calculating, designed to predict her every step. Shonda did not step. She vanished. To Marrow and the widows watching from behind cover, it looked like she simply blurred, dodging the neuromod pulses as if she could see their frequencies before they formed. But to Shonda, it felt differently. She was no longer reacting to attack vectors. She was reading intent. They moved like math. She moved like choice. She slid beneath the first cohort's strike, disarmed her, and redirected her momentum into the second, fracturing both of their neural implants with a single redirected pulse baton. A third cohort leaped, silent, precise, aiming for Shonda's spinal cord. Shonda caught her mid-air by the throat. "Wrong lesson," Shonda murmured. She slammed the woman into the wall hard enough to crack metal. Widow 3 whispered, stunned, "Is she still... her?" Marrow answered without taking her eyes off Shonda. "She's finally allowed to be." Behind the glass, Director Hale watched with narrowing eyes. His hands were steady. His breath was controlled, but his pulse was stuttering. "She's unhinged from protocol," one architect whispered behind him. "No, Hale said. "She's unhinged from limitation." He pressed his palm against a biometric panel. The mirror room activated. Screens ignited. Neural arrays awakened. Bodies in stasis convulsed. The whole chamber came alive like a memory reanimating itself. Hale spoke into the intercom. "You cannot destroy us, S-804, because we are inside you." Shonda turned her head slightly. "Then get out." She threw a shock disk. It detonated against the glass, spiderwebbing the barrier but not breaking it. Hale smirked. "Of course it won't shatter. You think we'd build our legacy in something breakable?" Shonda exhaled slowly. "You're confusing glass with power." Then she walked toward the mirror room door. The Ascendant line regrouped to stop her. 8 of them left, recalibrating formation. Marrow shouted, "Shonda, they're adapting." Shonda nodded. "So am I." She accelerated, no longer stepping but flowing, every movement an aftershock of intention. She disabled 3 cohorts with non-lethal neural breaks, disarming them with clinical precision, not killing, choosing, because the program wanted brutality. But she chose boundaries. 2 more cohorts tried to flank. She swept their legs and dropped them with a joint lock combination she hadn't used since Kandahar. The last 3 hesitated. One of them whispered, not to Shonda, but to herself, "I don't want to fight." Shonda paused. Humanity. It survived in the cracks. She pointed to the corridor behind them. "Go." 2 fled. 1 stayed, eyes empty, posture rigid. A full imprint, no self left. Shonda ended her suffering quickly. The mirror room door opened. Langston screamed, "Shonda, no! If you step into that interface, the program will rewrite itself around you." Shonda turned back. Then let it see what it missed. Inside, the chamber was colder than she remembered. Servers hummed like breathing lungs. Suspended bodies floated in gel. Iterations of her, frozen mid-thought. The walls formed a circle around a central platform engraved with a single phrase, "The quiet must be taught." Hale stood at the far end, surrounded by data conduits. "You were our masterpiece," he said softly. "You were supposed to lead the next evolution of care warfare." Shonda approached the platform. "You built an army out of women who wanted to save lives." "We built precision," Hale corrected. "You made compassion messy, inefficient." Shonda stopped. "You used our silence as raw material." "Yes," Hale admitted, "because the world listens to you last, which makes you perfect weapons." Shonda felt something shift behind her eyes. Not fury, recognition. "You misunderstood silence," she said. "It's not obedience. It's the space before a decision." Hale tilted his head. "And what decision is that?" Shonda reached out and placed her hand on the central neural column. The mirror room lit up like a struck nerve. Alarms blared. Architects shouted. Neural feeds short-circuited. Langston cried out, covering her ears. Marrow stared in awe. Hale's pupils constricted. "What are you doing?" Shonda answered without raising her voice. "I'm rewriting the curriculum." The mirror room systems began to crash. Not destructively, precisely. Every profile that had been modeled on her, every simulated nurse, every copy, every behavioral graft, she rewrote them, gave them their names back, gave them their choices back, gave them endings that didn't end in erasure. Screens flooded with new code. Restore. Identity, restore. Autonomy. Purge. Silence protocol. Hale lunged toward the platform. "Stop, you'll collapse the entire network." Shonda looked at him calmly. "That's the idea." She activated Code Black, the failsafe, the one they embedded in her in case she ever broke containment. But she reversed the targeting parameters. Instead of binding her, it unbound them. The stasis tanks shattered. The gel boiled away. Echoes of the women inside, not alive, not dead but mapped, flashed through the chamber like spectral memory. Every error, every trauma, every scream the program had tried to compress into compliance, Shonda freed them. The chamber lights blew out in a cascade, the walls groaned, the servers shut down one by one, the mirror room died, not with a bang, with a breath. When the dust settled, Hale was on his knees. "What are you?" he whispered. Shonda stepped off the platform. "I'm quiet," she said. "Not yours." Marrow entered behind her. Langston followed, weeping openly at the sight of the destroyed lab. Hale lunged again, but Widow 9 subdued him before he made it 2 steps. Marrow looked at Shonda. "It's done. The whole network is dead. They can't rebuild without the mirror." Shonda nodded, but didn't exhale. Langston approached her gently. "Are you still yourself?" Shonda considered the question. The 5th dose thrummed inside her, not controlling, not consuming, just present. "I'm more myself than I've ever been," she said. Marrow gave a short, exhausted laugh. "So what now?" "We walk away." Shonda looked toward the sunrise bleeding across Kandahar. "No," she said quietly. "We walk forward." Epilogue. Global feedback. 15 days later, the world learned fragments of the truth. Classified documents leaked, senators resigned, Neurovantis collapsed, night school disappeared from every database within 12 hours. And the widows? They didn't hide anymore. Their network grew, not underground, but in daylight. A coalition of frontline workers, survivors, whistleblowers, medics who refused to be silent. They called themselves the Quiet Code Initiative, not a rebellion, a lineage reclaimed. As for Shonda, no agency could locate her, no facial recognition system could map her, no intelligence database could predict her next move. Some said she vanished, some said she went to ground, some said she was still fighting, somewhere no one dared to look. But the widows knew better. Shonda Hayes didn't vanish. She evolved into something the architects could never design. A woman whose silence wasn't a void. It was a choice and a warning.